This is Everyday Spirituality, a podcast where we explore the stories of people whose spiritual practices fill them up for the journey of everyday life. I'm Pastor Debbie Bronkema, leader of an online community called connect.faith, where creativity, spirituality, and justice meet. Music and production by Evan Klosser. This is Everyday Spirituality with connect.faith. I am Debbie Bronkema, and I'm here today with Chanda Rule. Chanda is a singer and a songwriter. She hosts our own sister podcast, The Courageous Voice. She likes to create community, provide opportunities for people to heal and to explore their own voice. And she uses her gifts of writing in just so many ways. Lately, a series of songs called Let the River Flow that she co-wrote with Ike Sturm. We are really excited that you are here today. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here as well. Thank you for asking me and for having me today.
Absolutely. So, Shanna, you've been part of connect.faith in lots of different ways for a long time. You're the dot in Vienna, Austria that we love
I
to
love that.
celebrate.
Thank
And it's
you.
been very fun to get to know you over this time. And I just wanted to ask you, how did you get started with singing and songwriting? Where did that come from in you in the beginning?
Oh, I think that seed was planted in me by so many things. By my mother, for one. I have been singing probably since I could create sounds because my mom just sang with me all the time, and I just watch how I parent my child, and I think it's just there's always music and there's always singing, so I imagined that it was the same way for me. Everybody around me was singing and everybody went to church, and church was the place for singing. So between church and my mother and like old school black church meant like it was all the time. So that was at least 75% of my like life experience. Yeah. And I think most of the people that I grew up with had a similar family structure. So we were always singing, and that's how we played. We sang together. I sang with my cousins and my friends, and
Okay,
it's just
that's
always
fun.
been a
I love
part
that.
of
That's how you
life.
played. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's wonderful. That's wonderful.
Yes. Oh, and the writing. The songwriting also started as a kid. Actually, the true story that is just coming to me right now is, my parents were old school, so they weren't like super, super, super strict because their parents were super, super, super strict, but they were pretty strict. And so things like having an opinion or talking back, those things, I didn't do those things, but I would write songs.
Oh, oh,
Yes,
that's
about
good.
yeah, about what I wanted to do and what I didn't want to do and what I thought was mean. So I guess those are my very first forays into songwriting.
Yes, using your voice in a
Hmm.
way that was safe enough to use it. That's
Hmm.
amazing. I love that.
For a
I love
while.
that.
Hmm.
So, when you start to think about the courageous voice and that whole concept, can you tell me what are your hopes and dreams about that?
Ooh, well, that started twofold. For me, a courageous voice is the authentic voice. And this is something that I have been really working towards how to really present myself in a way that's completely authentic and feel comfortable with it, and not feel like I have to sugarcoat or like, make nice with certain things. So this is something that I've been working on for a while. And I saw, because I'm a vocal coach, and I saw that this is something that, in a different way, trickled over into a lot of the issues that my students were having. You know, they would go and they'd be like, oh man, I had this song. It was so good at home. It was so good in the shower. And then they'd come in front of me and they were so nervous, or they would have a gig and they would like completely freeze. And so we started to really talk a lot about this concept of what it means to sing courageously. And for me, a courageous singing voice for them at the time is okay, so how do you walk with that fear onto stage and not feel like you have to push it away or that it's like a one or the other? So it just became this conversation that was always happening, and then I realized that okay, this is not two different conversations, right? It's all together. How can I be authentic in front of other people, in front of myself, sharing my song, my voice, my words, my art. And so that's how That's how this was born. And it's my hope that I'm able to, through the podcast, through a conversation, say something that's inspirational, or through my coaching, that there's something, because I often have them journal and we have other exercises, meditation, that there's something that really will propel a singer or an artist forward a little bit more in being able to share themselves more authentically.
That's awesome. I love that answer about the courageous voice, where it came from and where it's going. And I've been having fun listening to your interviews with people and all the different people that have decided to say yes to exploring their voice in conversation with you.
Thank you. I'm loving that. And thank you for making it possible.
Oh, absolutely. It's
Yes.
connect.faith is excited about it. I also want to ask you about your own spiritual process, just in terms
Mm.
of how do you balance writing and being a mom and being a performer and doing a podcast? How do you find balance, if you find balance?
Oh, this is so interesting. Balance is like the buzzword of the past few weeks. Um, you know, wow. I struggle with finding balance, and what I ended up journaling about today about this concept of balance is that I think that what I imagine balance to be is probably not balance, actually, now that I'm saying this. And I think that what I've always imagined balance to be is this perfect, like, delineation, like, now I'm going to do this and I have enough time for this, and now I have enough time for this. And I think that what is happening is that, I don't know what the mathematical term of this is. It's like the pendulum swing.
Okay. Okay.
Right?
Good.
There's a lot of it. So I would say, like, maybe for writing for the past few weeks, I was like on it. Like, every morning I was like, let me find another cafe. I'm putting in my little 20 minutes. Then it's gonna be 30, I don't know. Right. And then the weekend, we had a long weekend, and then it was just like, okay, nope. And then my son got sick. And so then, like, okay, he's taking the priority. So this is interesting. But the interesting thing about the podcast is, because I don't feel like I'm working alone with it,
Mhm.
like, it's been like a constant, right? So I guess the answer to that is, the things that are steady in my life are things that I am really working in some sort of community with, because I really, really, really need that. I need it. Like, if I don't have it, like, it's like, okay, podcast happens for a good month, really strong, and then like 2 months, I'm like, oh my God, I overdid podcast. No, I need to. Um,
Yeah.
so finding a community is really helpful for balance. Really, I'm still struggling. I will, like, really kind of go hardcore on something and burn out, and then there's something else that I have to go hardcore on and burn
So the
out.
balance is like, if you looked at a month at a time, you might have
Yeah.
balance. Just don't look
Yes.
for a day.
Yeah. No. 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 But it
Yeah.
definitely, it's like a teeter totter.
Up and down. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what is your process for writing? How do you go from the blank piece of paper to the poetry and the lyrics and the stories that you tell?
Whoa. Yeah, this is interesting. I have a new process. That's why I'm saying it's interesting, because I'm having a new process right now. Before, I think it was just the commitment to show up. And I think now it's the same. But before, it was a commitment to show up, and I didn't have any structure around it. I would just kind of sit. So,
Okay.
like, on this last project that I did with Ike, the Let the River Flow, there was one poem in particular, like, and this has never happened before. There was a day, the entire day. Like, I remember the sun coming up and going down,
Oh
and
my,
I was sitting in front of the screen, sitting.
wow.
I was just sitting. I had a deadline with that, and I had to make the space. And so I think at the core, it's a space making, because sometimes I show up for that space and there's like so much, and sometimes there's nothing. So that was an extreme. But recently, I've changed my writing process, which is really working for me, because that was working before, by the way, like creating space. Whether I, like, procrastinate for a couple of days and then just like on
For the whole
like day
day.
5.
Yeah, yeah.
But now I'm doing this thing where I just show up every day no matter what, and it's only like a tiny amount of time. And I never thought that would work for me, because I'm like, no, I need like an hour to, like, let the juices begin. No, but now it's just like, okay, 20 minutes and just write.
Yep. your brain gets primed that this is the time I do this. And yeah,
I love it. I love that. And I love stopping at a certain time no matter what. And especially when it's like a juicy time, because then it's not so much the next day to like jump back in. It's like, oh yeah, it's the juice. Keep going.
right, right, right. Yeah, some people
Yeah.
say that, oh, I have to stop at the end of a story. I'm like, but then you don't have the hook to get you started the next day. It's good.
Yeah. Is that what you're doing too?
Yeah, that's what I do too. Yep. Mine
Okay.
is, if I'm doing fiction, it's 250 words a day,
Okay.
which takes about 20
Nice.
minutes. Yeah,
Okay.
20 minutes to half an hour. And it's not edited 250 words. It's just
Exactly.
250 words. And then the editing comes later after the whole story unfolds. But
Hmm.
yeah, I love doing it that way.
Yeah.
Now, there's other projects I do where I'm working to a deadline. And for those, it's more, okay, here's the paper. And
Yes.
there's the deadline. What's going to come out? But so far, that usually works. Usually. So,
Yeah.
yeah. And, the pastor part of me, Sunday always comes. So then it's done, whether it's done or not. I know that you went to seminary, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering how you feel that education has impacted your life in these last few years once you moved to Austria.
Yeah. I mean, completely, actually. And more so with the writing,
Uh-huh. Okay.
because I wasn't, I mean, I was doing a bit of songwriting, but I wasn't really writing anymore.
Uh,
And that whole process of writing sermons got me into this new mode and just remembering how much I love this. I love research and I can get caught up in research and all this stuff. And when I was in seminary, my advisors really, really pushed me to get out of that. And they're like, no, you're an artist, you're a creative person. We don't want this standard form of sermon for you. That's not you. Like, go, push, push, push. And so I'm really appreciative of that because it really just got me. I found something that I love. And I will
mm,
say something new because I wrote a while ago. I mean, I studied journalism in undergrad. So I
did you?
was writing then, and then I kind of didn't like it anymore. So, but yeah, it's just, I love this. I love writing these stories. And, I think when I moved here, it was a bit disappointing because of the language. I couldn't really go forward with it immediately.
Mhm.
And people are like, oh no, what is that? No, what is that you're doing? Nah, no, But in the past few years, it has found its way back, which has been amazing, really.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So I see you on social media posting about joy. Can you tell us what that is about?
Yes. So I started that. I did it for a year pretty faithfully. And I started it maybe at the beginning of last year. And I did it because my therapist actually, I was feeling so stuck. And she's just like, well, and we're talking about like expressing myself authentically. She's like, well, maybe you can like do something on social media. I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. Like, that's no. So So then I just kind of started these little tiny posts because we were on lockdown. And then Vienna actually had a Black Lives Matter march, which was humongous here. I didn't even know there were so many people of color here until I went to that march. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And my son was there with me and he was marching. He had his little posters up and he was leading songs. And I was just so happy. I was so happy about it. And so I did a post and I said, okay, well, maybe, maybe I'll start with this joy. And then I think around the same time in the States, there were so many police killings happening. And then there were all these marches and there was fires. And then there was like Trump was all over the place all the time. And, it was so much. There was all this stuff happening. And there was this conversation amongst friends about how and what they were talking to their children about and how young should your child be when you first have the police conversation with them if
Mm.
they're a boy specifically of color. And I was like, oh my god, like I cannot, like it was so overwhelming to me. And I was just like, okay, well, my act of resistance is this: is I'm not gonna do this. I'm gonna tell my son like stories of joy and positivity for as long as I can.
Yeah.
right? And not in a sense of putting on rose colored glasses, but in the sense of like, no, this is not going to be the definition of what life is, period. And that's where that came from. And I'm like, okay, I want expressions of joy, and no, it doesn't have to be me smiling every day, but that's what this is going to be. And I wanted that to combat like all these other messages that were telling me, no, you can't be joyful. No, you must leave your house and be afraid. No.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, that's where that came from.
Well, well, and it's joy. It's not happiness. It's not,
Exactly.
right. Yeah.
Yes, this is
It's the
stuff that
deep,
like my grandparents, my grandmothers used to always talk about this, about this joy, and this was like linked to different biblical scriptures of this unexplainable joy. This weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning, right? It's just like the sun has just rose. Whatever was there is still there, right? But it's
right.
this
Okay.
unexplainable thing, and yeah, yeah, it makes me
That's,
fiery.
oh, that's great. That's great. And your son is how old?
He's 8.
8.
Yes.
So he's asking questions and getting interested. And do you find he points you toward joy?
Yes. And this is the unexplainable joy. Yes, because he gets on my nerves right now. But but yes, yes. He's just like a bundle of energy and questions, and
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
And you can tell like I didn't want to have like a lot of boundaries on him, and I wanted
Mm.
him to be able to feel free to express himself. And like, yeah, it makes parenting a bit harder and challenging. But
But yeah, eight is a time when they're curious and
yeah.
they remind you what we stopped looking at. So
Yeah.
it's really, really fun. So what feeds you spiritually now?
Hmm. Okay. Right now, specifically, I will say quiet time, meditation,
Mhm.
journaling, definitely. And I have been practicing yoga. And what I
Ah,
love about I love yoga so much. And this whole focus on self knowledge and having a spiritual practice, right? But right now, specifically, I'm spending a lot of time with that.
in the
Yeah.
quiet and what kind of meditation do you enjoy?
Well, actually, I sit. I just have a sitting practice. Actually, this is funny because I just interviewed this guy, Jason, on my podcast, and he introduced me to this gamma ray meditation, which I'm loving.
Really?
I absolutely love it.
Tell me about it. What little
He,
bit can you explain about
well, the little bit, he's a scientist for one, so the way he explains stuff is like always like a little bit out of my grasp.
it?
But so he was talking about the different modes of the brain, when you're like light sleeping and then the deep sleep and the REM sleep, they all have these different names.
Okay.
But gamma is in the opposite direction. So it's supposed to be when your brain is extremely like active in a way, but not like chatty active, but I guess vibrant.
Okay.
This is how he explained it. But what I like about it is there's just these different, it's just this way of breathing. And I think that I've never really latched onto a meditation practice that was, following your breath.
Okay. Yeah.
For me, it was, I like the ones, notice what this feels like, notice this, and then just like a quiet silence meditation.
Mhm.
Um, but I really like this focusing on the breath. I think that's what it is.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Hmm.
That's fun. Well, thank you. So, what other things would you like to share with our everyday spirituality people today?
Everyday spirituality. Well, you know what's funny? When I was in seminary, there were these people in New York doing something called a 90-minute sermon.
Oh, well, my.
And I'm sorry, 90-second sermon, excuse
Okay,
me.
that's a lot better.
A 90-second sermon. And they had completely revived it. They had this church, and I think they were down to maybe like 20 members, and they completely revived this community doing these 90-second sermons. And they came in and they did a lecture, and we had to do them. And mine was called Everyday Spirituality.
No way. Oh,
So I
that's
feel
awesome.
like, yes, I feel like
This is a full circle moment. Yeah.
exactly,
Awesome.
exactly. It's funny because I never would consider this a spiritual practice, but it is, and this is gratitude. And it's so funny that like I didn't mention that because I don't know, for me, having this really tiny gratitude practice, and this is as soon as I open my eyes, it's like, okay, three things. What are these three things that I'm grateful for? And I gave myself a challenge a while ago that it cannot be like a material thing. Like it
Okay.
has, like, what is it? Like, okay, I'm breathing. Okay, my husband's breathing next to me. I hear my kids snoring. Like, bam, right? But I absolutely love this practice. And I feel like it has been completely life changing to me.
Mm,
This simple practice of gratitude. And when I think of like everyday spirituality, like that is it for years, and it has gotten me through because when I first moved here, I was miserable for a while. like,
that's a
oh my
big move.
God,
Yeah.
it's a big move. I had a prayer partner back in New York, and I called her and I'm like, oh my God, I hate it here. Da, 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 da. We would pray in the mornings, and which meant we talked to each other, and we like complained for like 15 minutes. And then we're like, okay, let's pray. Let's pray about it. But that was one thing, is gratitude. She listened to me like moan and complain and cry. And then she's like, all right, take a deep breath and look around you and tell me three things that you're grateful for.
Mm,
And I'm like, oh my God, right. I'm in this like really cute bathroom that is like two bedrooms in my last apartment in Jersey City. I'm like, I'm like, okay, well, I'm breathing and we're fine. And then all these things, right? And so I've always been able to go to that practice, and I'm grateful for it and I love it. And it's simple.
it is. And I love the idea of first thing in the morning as you're waking up to just start the day from that perspective. That's
Yeah.
really, really helpful. I'm really grateful for that. Thank you for sharing it.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, if people want to know more about you, find you, hear you, where should they look for you?
Oh, let's see. I have a website, shandarule.com. And I'm also often on Instagram. I'm not on as much as I used to be, but like at least 3 times a week. I am Chanda Rule.
Okay.
And then there's also The Courageous Voice. You can find me there. I'm posting as well on Instagram.
Terrific. So, this has been Everyday Spirituality with connect.faith. And you can find us in all the places you regularly subscribe to podcasts. And if there's someone you know that might like to hear the stories that you heard today, we'd love for you to share. Thank you so much. It was great to have you, Shanna.
Thank you. Thank you so much.